Good afternoon, folks, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to the MMA Sucka Podcast. My name is Tim Wheaton, joined as always by the editor at MMA Sucka, Frazer Krohn. Frazer, how you doing today?
Good, mate. It's not a dream. Leon Edwards is still the UFC welterweight champion. Not a dream. It happened. Big high kick, knockout. We spoke about it for about 45 minutes last week. It happened. Leon Edwards, welterweight champion.
And if you want to see the best breakdown in the game, author Frazer Krohn put together a highlight reel, a technical breakdown, and the best one that I've seen of how exactly that kick was set up. And we're talking about second-to-second breakdowns here. Like, how long did this article take? I'll put it down below for everybody to link up, but like, how long did this article take? This took hours.
It was, yeah, it did take hours. I watched the fight so what Tim's alluding to, I wrote an article breaking down Leon Edwards' high kick, showing that it wasn't a fluke. You know, I saw a lot online saying, "Oh, it was a lucky shot. Kamaru needs an instant rematch because you know it was a lucky shot and all this." And it wasn't a fluke. If you watch the final round, is what I've broken down. Is the last 5 minutes. Leon was setting that kick up, and he was setting it up throughout the fight. But in the final round, in particular, he was setting it up. And it's the micro things that you might not see, like just touching the front hand of Kamaru Usman to get his range and throwing the 1-2 and seeing that Usman was circling out to the right. And then obviously we saw with the breakdown, with the knockout, the 1-2, Usman was circling, you know, he parried the hand, circled off to his right hand side, and obviously the high kick landed. But yeah, I watched the final round in full speed. I watched it multiple times in half speed, and then I dropped it down to 0.25 speed. That's the advantage of you know, having UFC Fight Pass, because you can really slow it down into those microseconds. And it took me a good sort of 3 to 4 hours to collate, but no, I am proud of that work. I do think it's quite a good piece. So yeah, be sure to check it out below.
Yeah, link will be down below. It's an incredibly good piece, especially for dorks like us who just love striking breakdowns and things of that nature. This is an incredible piece with video highlights, and like you said, Fight Pass for dorks like us, that 0.5 speed. Chef's kiss. That just super duper helps.
Exactly, yeah. And you know, like you say, dorks like us that love striking. I think we were treated this weekend as well to some of the best striking I've seen. You know, from one championship, it was some of the greatest knockouts, some of the greatest finishes I've seen all year, and it was just a phenomenal card. So it's just to go from Leon Edwards and being able to break that down all week into a one championship card that had some of the most technical, some of the best striking, and then even better striking in the KSI boxing match. I mean, we'll break them all. We'll break them all down. But no, in all seriousness, yeah, if you don't subscribe to UFC Fight Pass, I think they do a free 30-day trial. Be sure to just check it out, because especially ahead of UFC, 280, they'll have loads of content on there, and you can break it down into microseconds if you're geeks like me and Tim. But you know, rest assured that we'll be breaking it down on MMA Sucka anyway. So if you don't want to subscribe, we'll be all over the site breaking down the micro for you.
Oh yeah, UFC Fight Pass. I want to I would love to pretend that they sponsored us for this episode, but no, legit. Like they even have, obviously they have the old Pride library, but they have the old K1 library, which is hard to come by, and or at least they used to. Maybe they don't anymore. They don't have K1 anymore. Forget it. Don't subscribe to this garbage.
No, they do have a lot of good stuff. You know, they have LFA and CFFC and Cage Warriors. They've got, I think they have a deal with Cage Warriors where they put all the Cage Warriors cards on there. So especially when you've got guys like Paddy Pimblett, Nathaniel Wood, Molly McCann, you know, these guys are, and Conor McGregor, you know, these guys are coming through the UFC at a rate of knots. And you know, so for someone like Paddy Pimblett, who hasn't had an awful lot of UFC fights, when you're looking to break down one of his fights, and you can go back 10 or 15 fights from his first Cage Warriors fight and watch them all through, it is a really helpful tool, to be fair.
Do you think, I wanted to ask you this, speaking of Leon Edwards the other day, do you think the nature in MMA, now it's, Leon Edwards is certainly our guy, so we support him. And I recognize that now that I'm hearing other people talk about this fight, that they weren't as enthused as us. Is the way that we talk about flukes in MMA wrong or right? Because obviously GSP Matt Serra is kind of the one that people always point to as a very clear like fluke. 99 out of 100, this doesn't happen. And then people kind of apply that same way of talking to the Leon Edwards Kamaru Usman, which I don't feel was a fluke. People are saying like it's a Hail Mary and all that stuff. But I don't know if when we talk about flukes in MMA, is it almost doing a disservice of like Matt Serra still did that. He didn't throw a punch out of like, you know, by accident. He threw a punch and that knocked a man out. That wasn't, like, how do we even talk about flukes? And it's something I've wrestled with for quite a while now. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think that to say pretty much all surprising knockouts are flukes is just, somewhat disrespectful. You got Jorge Masvidal, that flying knee against Ben Askren. Oh, that was, it was a fluke that it landed. Well, we've seen the footage of him drilling that before. We've seen against when Robbie Lawler faced Ben Askren, that Askren came out and shot at an awkward sort of level and shot for the takedown almost instantly.
Yeah.
Conor McGregor, Jose Aldo, it was a fluke that left hand landed. But we've seen the footage of him drilling that sort of, slip counter left hand backstage on the night of. With Leon Edwards, the footage has come out that his coach is Dave Lavelle, and I can't remember the other guy's name, but they were saying, look, the high kick's there. I don't want it to come up the middle. I want it to come round the side. So that's why Leon was throwing the teep kicks throughout the fight to maybe think that to maybe make Kamaru think that he's teep kicking, and then the high kick comes from the sort of the roundhouse setup rather than the teep kick setup. I think and like you say with GSP and Matt Serra, was it a fluke? No, it was certainly a surprise. But how many fights did GSP go on to win after that, and how many fights did he win before that, where any of these guys could have landed that shot, and it just happened to be Matt Serra? It wasn't a fluke. Yes, the circumstances are slightly different, coming off tough, and I'm pretty sure it was a tough season to sort of kind of. It was almost like a save your career tough season, and Matt Serra won it. But like I said, GSP faced, just off the top of my head, Bisping couldn't do it, Hendricks couldn't do it, Condit couldn't do it. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Nick Diaz couldn't do it. Thiago Alves couldn't do it. Dan Hardy couldn't do it. And these are all, some of these are the best strikers in the, Dan Hardy, Carlos Condit, Nick Diaz. These are really solid strikers. Bisping's a quality striker, and that was up at middleweight. So it's in my opinion, these aren't fluky shots. You do get the odd sort of strange shot, let's say, where maybe the fighter didn't mean, when they're. It's not. I suppose it's not. There's not even a lot of strange shots because I feel that everything's thrown with intention in there. Yes, you have the flukes, the Chris Weidman leg break of Uriah, Chris Weidman's leg break when he fought Uriah Hall, but then Uriah Hall turned his shin out, so that kind of comes as predicted.
It's a defense.
Exactly.
Like how you defend it, yeah.
And Tom Aspinall, that was maybe more of a sort of, I wouldn't say fluke because he came into the fight with an injury, but it was, less predictable, should we say. But I wouldn't say, Leon's head kick was a fluke at all, because we saw the footage beforehand of him training when he's sort of just hitting the pads with his elbows and then setting up that high kick. We've now seen footage come out from his corner team saying, look, the high kick's going to be there. If he circles off to his right, the high kick's there from the roundhouse, not the teep setup. And then obviously, with my breakdown, I kind of alluded to the fact that it wasn't just that, I'm just going to throw this high kick. He saw that Kamaru was going out to the right. He saw that his hands were dropping. He was looking to parry every time that Leon threw an inside leg kick. He was looking to sweep that parry away. So why, he's looking to parry shots. He's not looking to catch these shots on the guard. And, and as we saw, the sort of right, because Leon's a southpaw, the right jab sort of doesn't land. Kamaru sort of sweeps it across, and he's not really expecting, and he sort of circles out towards his right hand side, and obviously the head kick, and we all know what happened there. But yeah, I agree. I wouldn't call it a fluke at all. I think it was set. It was. I think if that shot would have come in the third round, no one's saying it's a fluke. No one's saying it's a lucky shot. No one's saying, everyone's just saying it's a clean knockout because it came with just a minute left in the fight. People are saying, oh, it's a fluke. He was down by 10 rounds or whatever the people are saying about Leon these days, It's people are disrespecting Leon as far as saying, oh yeah, well he won the first round, but then he lost the next 3 years on his way to a loss. That's fact. Yeah. But he still knocked his opponent out. It doesn't matter if it happens in the first second or the last second. He won the fight fair and square. And it wasn't, there wasn't a contentious, the referee stepped in early, split decision or bad judging decision. It was definitive. Leon knocked Kamaru Usman into the shadow realm and not in a fluky manner. Yes, it came late, but he was setting it up throughout the fight, in my opinion.
I agree with you. I completely co-sign with you on everything that you're saying, especially with George St. Pierre. As a Canadian, you're just whispering poetry in my ear and talk about Leon Edwards. I agree with you. It's not a fluke. It had intention. It was set up. It was planned. But let's get to it. So we're going to talk one championship. They had their big couple of events this past weekend. We're going to talk some of the KSI boxing because I know that's what the crowd is salivating for. And then we're going to break down UFC Paris. But let's talk about Demetrious Johnson for a minute because I think he's a guy. We've used the language that people fight to the level of their competition. And someone like Miesha Tate's a really good example of like she's competing with a prime Ronda Rousey. And then she fights her next opponent who's just outside the top 10 and she's like barely scraping by to beat her. I think Demetrious Johnson doesn't know the level of his competition, but once he knows, he rises and plateaus to that level. So like he loses to Ian McCall and he goes, oh, my opponents are that good. I will fight that good for the rest of my career. Loses to Dominic Cruz. And he goes, I didn't realize people were that good. I'll fight that good for the rest of my career. And just last year, he lost to Adriano Moraes. So he goes, yeah, no problem. I'll fight as good as him. He is such a tactician. He was outsized by quite a wide margin in this fight. He was knocked out last year. And then he had a great fight. He kind of out-grappled him, out-clinched him, out-struck him at points. He was definitely put under pressure with almost stopped by a high kick here and there. He was controlled and still rallied back. I know it's old news after seeing 11 title defenses in the UFC, but this Demetrious Johnson guy is really good.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I've wrote. I think DJ's, on my notes for this episode, I've put, are we not respecting DJ for his body of work? Because it's not like he's, left the UFC and started fighting bums. Adriano Moraes is a quality fighter.
Yes.
DJ's beaten every single person he's faced aside from Dominic Cruz, which is up at bantamweight when he was far undersized, and Brad Pickett back in the WEC days. Yep. He lost to Henry Cejudo, but he'd already beaten Henry Cejudo once. He lost last time out to Adriano Moraes. He beats him again. He beats him. He beats him, sort of gets that one back, as it were, this past weekend.
Yeah,
and it's not even the manner in which he's winning these fights. Against Wilson Hayes, one of the best BJJ guys we've seen, armbars him. Against Ray Borg, that crazy, what he called the mighty whiz bar, when he sort of suplexed into the armbar.
So good. Oh my God.
It's, and then in this fight to have lost by a knee and then to almost do the exact same thing, he didn't. It's almost like he didn't need to throw that knee. He sort of rocked him and pretty much had him out with the overhand right. He could have just followed up with strikes, and it probably would have been stopped. And yet he decided to go for the knee. It's the manner in which this guy is doing these things, finishing these fights. He's finishing fights as well. Yes, he's had a couple of decisions in one thus far, and he had a lot of decisions in the UFC. But if you look, Horiguchi armbar. Henry Cejudo, he finished Henry Cejudo. We can't forget about that. Wilson Hayes armbar, Ray Borg armbar. He got a submission in his one debut, and he went to decision twice, and now he scored his. That's his first knockout since, or first TKO knockout. Since Henry Cejudo.
Yep.
I don't think we appreciate DJ for his body of work, and even watching the fight, the way that he effortlessly just transitions southpaw orthodox. That first round, especially. At no point, I don't think, did he spend more than about 30 to 40 seconds in the same stance. He'd stand with his left hand back, and then he just avoid a strike, but effortlessly stand back into orthodox. And this is what I think a lot of guys and girls sort of in the world of MMA struggle with is, you're an orthodox fighter. I'll throw a few strikes, I'll back you up, and you'll stay in orthodox. Well, DJ can really avoid these strikes because he can so seamlessly fight from either stance, and it's something that I think we've seen him evolve as well. Because from I can't remember a lot of his UFC fights when he's been that fluid with avoiding the strikes. He's very much been either southpaw or orthodox. It's not been all that fluid, in my opinion, and especially this fight, and like just little things like. Aside from when he's actually, throwing strikes with his hands are always open, so he's parrying shots away, and that's again something that we saw in this fight. And yeah, it's just I thought, although like you say, it's massively undersized, and we saw that on the ground in this one. Mm-hmm. He just did what he needed to do to win the fight, and obviously win the fight he did, and by emphatic knockout in the same way that he was knocked out in his last fight. It's a phenomenal performance.
I think, yeah, I think Demetrious Johnson will always be one of those guys that we look back in the history of MMA as one of the greatest of all times that people probably don't talk about enough. Like, it was a new division. A lot of the guys he was fighting, like, other than Cejudo, a lot of those guys kind of just like fell off, which is fairly typical of like you get a title defense and then fall off from there. But like, people don't remember Ray Borg or Wilson Hayes, that and that didn't help with his legacy very much. But I think he might fill that role of, like, in boxing, maybe I'm way off with this name and stop me when I'm wrong, but like Jack Dempsey, of like everyone's fighters greatest of all time. Like, fighters look at Demetrious Johnson as like, I cannot understand how this guy is that skilled. Whereas fans are just like, yeah, he's in the mix. But I think technically it's insane how high quality Demetrious Johnson is, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think the UFC did him any favors as far as promoting him. You know, he's
Definitely
multiple fights. You know, I can't recall an awful lot of times that he actually headlined a pay-per-view. You know, multiple fights where he would be fighting on Fight Night cards, you know, and then they put him up against people. You know, if you look at his last 4 or 5 UFC fights, it was co-main event against Henry Cejudo in his what would be his last fight. We didn't know that at the time, but yeah, co-main event against Henry Cejudo, co-main event against Ray Borg, UFC on Fox, main event against Wilson Hayes, Ultimate Fighter headline against Tim Elliott. Then he did that. Then he was co-main event. You know, the last time he headlined an event for the UFC was against John Dodson in 2015 at UFC 191. Now, for context, Frank Mir and Andrei Arlovski were the co-main event. Paige Van Zandt was still in the UFC.
Right, and Frank and Andrei Arlovski were old in that
Yeah,
fight.
for sure. You know, I mean, the main card, Paige Van Zandt, Jan Blachowicz lost and was 30-25 in against Corey Anderson. Anthony Johnson beat Jimmy Manuwa. Frank Mir lost a decision to Andrei Arlovski. And then, Demetrious Johnson defeated John Dodson. But that's the last time he headlined an event. But then you look at that, you know, he had that fight, then he had a performance of the night against Henry Cejudo, performance of the night against Wilson Hayes, performance of the night and broke the record for most title defenses against Ray Borg, you know, fight of the night against Henry Cejudo. He had a performance of the night last time out, you know, this weekend in at one championship. But if you just, you know, he's got, I can't even, you know, it would take too long to even count it up, but he's got, you know, 6 or 7, maybe more.
Yeah.
So let me just quickly, so he's got fight of the night 3 times, knockout of the night once, submission of the night once, back when we had knockouts, and then 4-time performance of the night. He's got the most consecutive wins in the, you know, in title fights, third most wins in title fights, most consecutive title defenses in UFC history. I mean, and you know, you don't put this guy as headliner for the last 3 or 4 years of his UFC tenure. I mean, like you say, I think, you know, Rogan talks about it all the time, how DJ is, you know, one of the best, and he's done it the other way around. Whereas Ben Askren went from obviously 1 to the UFC and showed that he wasn't at that level.
Yeah,
DJ's shown that he's at that level, gone over to 1, faced adversity, and come back from that adversity, and still shown that he can do it. You know, he can mix it with the very best. And I think, without a doubt, I don't think he's appreciated by MMA fans, because I think MMA fans like the one-punch, flatline knockouts. Yeah. Whereas DJ is one of the most technical, you know, for guys like us, the technical striking aspects of DJ's game and the grappling, you know, in that first round, it's a tough round to score for me, because it was fairly even on the feet. Moraes got the takedown, but if you look at the state of Moraes' face after, you know, he had a swollen eye, he had that cut, so damage, you know, the damage was on DJ. So DJ looked fresh, you know, he looked like he hadn't really taken much damage. There was a few sort of risky moments, as it were, on the floor, but they're going to be on the floor when you they're going to be risky moments when you're undersized on the floor against a grappler like Moraes. And you know, people would watch that first round and think, oh, this is how the fight's going to go. You know, he's too small and he's on the bottom, he's lost the first round. Well, he did so much more damage than Moraes on the ground. So it's, you know, there's that debate there. And I think that's an evolution of his game as well, because we saw, against Henry Cejudo that he wasn't able to really get much off on the ground, even like sort of damage wise. And yet, fast forward to this past weekend, and he's done the far more damaging work on the ground.
Yep.
Despite being on bottom, it's just I don't, like I say, I really don't think we're respecting DJ for his body of work. I mean, we are, but I think MMA community as a whole don't respect DJ for his body of work and for his skill level. This guy is 31-4, and aside from that loss to he's already beat, like I say, he's already beat Henry Cejudo once and then lost to him. He lost to Adriano Moraes and beat Adriano Moraes back, as it were. Mm-hmm. We're not respecting this guy for what he does, and as much as it wasn't pure MMA, the Rodtang fight
was good.
Who takes those fights? Nobody takes those fights in like a UFC setting. I know it's slightly different because one has the mixed cards of Muay Thai, kickboxing, and MMA, so it makes it more logical sense. They're all under the same banner. But Israel Adesanya is not having a pure kickboxing match anytime soon.
No.
Kamaru Usman isn't having a high stakes wrestling match, and even we do see guys have these wrestling matches. Ben Askren had the wrestling match against Jordan Burroughs, but wrestling's a completely different game. You can't get too injured as far as being cut up or knocked out in a wrestling match.
Mm-hmm.
DJ could have been brutally knocked out by Rodtang. He could have had serious damage to his legs, and yet he still took that fight and obviously won it and did really well in that fight. So it's I think we really need to start respecting him as a even if you don't respect him as a fighter, you need to respect him as a martial artist, because he's one of the most technical, best guys we've ever seen, and I don't think we're going to have someone who is that well-rounded come through and that dominant in a long time.
Yeah, and he almost undersells everything of how good and how big some of these things that he does are, like the Rodtang fight, when he talks about like in negotiations, like, how did they offer you the Rodtang? How did they convince you to fight Rodtang and Muay Thai? And he's just like, well, they phoned me and asked if I want to fight Rodtang and Muay Thai, and I said, yeah. Like, that's it. Exactly. He doesn't sell it all. And he also like loves talking about other things a lot more than MMA. And I do feel like MMA fans almost don't deserve how cool DJ is, because he's out motorbiking with his kids, goes home and plays video games professionally. This guy is super cool. I almost feel like he's too good for us. Like, we're lucky to have a guy like Demetrious Johnson, right? He's cool as hell.
For sure. I think the issue is with DJ is, I think if he was competing 10 or 15 years ago, we'd respect him so much more. But now it's all about your social media presence. It's all about getting on the mic and trash talking and all of this. And we were speaking about Leon Edwards earlier, but his pound for pound, bang, headshot, dead, or whatever it was. He's got that printed on T-shirts. That is the 5 to 10 seconds. That much alone has gone viral.
Yes,
we don't expect DJ to ever come out with something like that.
No,
never. And like I say, 5 or 10 years ago, when your favorite and the best well-known mixed martial artists were the guys that were the best mixed martial artists. Mm-hmm. Paid dividends for them, because you didn't have to have a huge Instagram presence. You didn't have to be calling everyone out on Twitter. And that's really what DJ's sort of almost downfall has been in becoming a global superstar, in my opinion, is that he's not one of these trash talking guys. That he's not on the, he's not on Instagram calling out, McGregor's putting all sorts online every time there's a big fight. Well, DJ doesn't have to do that, because he can almost let his skills do the talking. But unfortunately for him, in the modern day, that's not enough these days.
Yeah. And he does cool things. Like, you ever tell that story of, like, when I fought Cejudo the first time? I was playing video games, and I was on a Twitch stream, so I put it on pause and said, I'll be right back. And I knocked out Henry Cejudo, and then I came back to my Twitch stream. That's badass. Tell us more about that. But yeah, like you said, he is such just like a dad who does this as like a day job kind of thing. And that's exactly how he treats it. This is just kind of something he does. And it's insane that he might be the most skilled person to ever do it. It's just amazing. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see how history treats him. And I hope it's kindly.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, unfortunately for him, we had a number of huge knockouts on the exact same card. So although, Ariel Helwani is putting in DJ's knockout, and yes, he got the performance of the night bonus, there were better knockouts on the card that could obviously also be put into a 5-second segment on One Championships, Twitter, Instagram, and whatnot. So they're going to be the ones that are probably being replayed because, yes, none of these guys are huge names. So why not put the, I can't say the guy's name because I'll butcher both of them, but the elbow knockout, the sort of step in straight elbow knockout, and the sort of hook to high kick knockout. That's my KO of the year. If that wasn't a Muay Thai fight, that would be my KO of the year.
We'll break down a few. We'll start at the top. The World Bantamweight Muay Thai Championship was on the line with Nango Nguyen Gadao fighting Liam Harrison from the UK. Just kicked his knee into oblivion. Liam still posting on Instagram this morning how pissed off he is about this. He was like, I want to give the fans at least a couple of rounds before. Even if I got knocked out, I wanted to go out on my shield. My knee giving out is BS. Like, I feel bad for Liam Harrison. And he's a bit too old. I don't know if he's going to work his way back to a title at this point.
Yeah, that's the thing. I did see his Instagram post saying that his knee kind of let him down. And, we were about, how long were we into the fight? A minute or a couple of minutes at least. It didn't really seem like we'd had any of the fight to actually know where that fight was going. And it was a real shame and a disappointment from a British perspective, especially because we also we had Amber Kitchen lose the decision pretty decisively earlier on in the card. So it's not exactly like the UK had too much to talk about on this card, and both guys unfortunately had pretty devastating losses, really.
Yeah, and this sucks for Liam Harrison. He talked about, like, if I beat Nango, I would probably be the greatest UK Muay Thai in history. And, like, yeah, you probably are already, honestly, Liam Harrison. Like, that's not a very tall order. But Nango is certainly in those, like, he's top 10 greatest of all times. Kind of changed his career in the last couple of fights. Like, he's on a 4-fight knockout win streak, and that's unheard of. Like, he's changed his career because he was a decision machine before. Started when he was like 9 years old just to make his family a little bit of extra money, and here he is today on broadcast TV, on Amazon TV, breaking legs from British guys. That's the dream.
Yeah, I mean, like I think some of the frustration probably comes from Harris knowing that he was, the underdog going into that fight, and not quite being able to even try and prove himself against, like you say, one of the world's best, one of the possibly one of the GOATs, especially in that weight class. It's just got to be frustrating that, yes, I was unlikely to win the fight anyway, but at least give me a chance to throw that Hail Mary punch late on. And he wasn't given that chance. And like you say, he's a little bit too old, I think, to come back from the injury and then get up to that level again. Hopefully, he'll come back from the injury. One will give him one or two more Muay Thai fights against big names. And then, he can ride off into the sunset, knowing that he, like you say, it's not exactly a huge weight, a huge pool of British Muay Thai fighters to sort of pick from.
Yeah,
he's, if not the best, top 3 in my opinion.
No problem there. Pan Payak Jitmuangnong filled in for Rod Tang because Rod Tang didn't even bother submitting a liquid sample for his hydration test. You guys want to talk about one? We know very little about what one's weight and hydration testing is. I think that one guy, John Wayne Barr, was the only guy who actually told us like what goes on and how odd it is. But like, so you do your weigh-in and hydration test, and if you miss one of them, you have 5 hours to do it. But John Wayne Barr was talking about like, so I missed my hydration, so I need to drink water, which is going to put the weight back on. But then I need to cut the water weight so I can like wait 5 hours from now. So I need to be rehydrated, putting weight on, and then I need to cut that weight again. But we know very little. And I think like Rod Tang's a big star. For him to drop out of a fight, that's a lot. He gets paid handsomely for doing this kind of stuff. Do you want to talk about, we don't know much about one's weigh-in stuff, but do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult, isn't it? Because I think that they are doing the weight management superior to the UFC and Bellator and PFL. They aren't letting their guys cut huge amounts of weight. But as you alluded to there, there's still issues. No one is yet to nail it down to, really get weigh-ins down to what they should be to make it as safe as possible. And I saw something, whether it's true or not, you see these pictures on Instagram, but DJ weighed 135 pounds. Despite being a flyweight, he weighed 135 pounds. One's weight classes are it's just the names are slightly different. That's all. And he weighed 135 pounds on the day of weigh-ins, and then on fight night he weighed 136 pounds.
Whoa, DJ's insane. What?
Yeah. So, we need to. Some promotion, our promotion needs to come out and say, right, our weight classes are this, and this. To alleviate cutting masses of weight, you have to be within, 2 months before when you enter training camp, let's say, you need to be within 20-25% of your weight. Then 5 weeks out, you need to be within 20, and you can't come into fight week any more than 10 pounds over. For example, obviously it's going to be a lot more technical than that, and then during fight week you can cut up to 10 pounds, no more, because we don't want you hurting your bodies, to be honest. And like you say, for Rodtang to not even submit a sample, you just make you question how much overweight he was. But I can't remember how you pronounce it. Panpayak?
Panpayak, yeah.
Yeah, it's close enough. To be stepping into that fight and to finish that fight, I'd almost forgotten that Rodtang was even on the card or even meant to be in that fight with the knockout that came from that one. It was one of the most. And he knew as soon as he landed it, he ran off. As soon as he landed that high kick, he ran off, and he knew it's done.
I love it.
Amazing knockout.
That was probably the best highlight from the card, like you said. Panpayak's a young guy, over almost 300 fights in his career. Now he gets to the finals of the Grand Prix, and he'll be fighting the guy who won via elbow knockout on the undercard, Superlek. Don't worry about the last name, Superlek. That'll be a great one. And this is the thing of, like, we want these big storylines. I like tournaments. I know sometimes tournaments end up being kind of weird because there's a tons of dropout. Panpayak wasn't even an alternate. Now he might win the whole thing. But this stuff excites me. So we get Panpayak for Superlek in the final. Awesome stuff. Looking forward to it. Let me turn this off.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Like you say, tournaments do throw up. Panpayak might win the whole thing. Same in the PFL. Dylan Taylor comes in as he wasn't even an alternate.
Yeah.
Comes in, knocks out Rory McDonald. Next fight, he's fighting for $1 million. These tournaments do throw up these crazy things that on paper shouldn't happen, but obviously these things happen, and it makes for great storylines, like you say. And it's just like you say, we look in mixed martial arts for exciting things to happen, and PFL really, because they've got the $1 million sort of there as like the carrot, the dangling carrot, and then the same with one. These guys can come in as not even having been alternates and win the whole tournament. It's they do really make for exciting outcomes, really.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Marcus Almeida never forgets that he's one of the greatest grapplers of all time and submits guys. No one's made it out of 3 minutes. He submitted a guy in one. Amir Ali Akbari remembered that he is actually a pretty good wrestler, and then got that done. I don't know if there's anything else you want to throw on that one card before moving forward.
I think we've kind of spoken about the highlights. The elbow, like you say, the elbow from Superlek, the Panpayak head kick. I mean, they've got their package for that final of that tournament. They've just got, you could just replay that elbow head kick, elbow head kick, elbow head kick, elbow. It's brilliant. And I think, like I said, I think we've kind of hit all the main talking points for one, which like we say, it was the only real. We'll go on to briefly talk about the KSI card, but one championship, if you didn't watch it, you should go back and at least watch the highlights, because that was the only real MMA this weekend, and it was well worth a watch.
Oh yeah, it was high level stuff and great production quality. I always forget, like, when new people watch one, that's what they mention. It's like, this is really good production. I forget that because I watched so much of it, but like, yeah, this is better than Bellator.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think obviously the UFC is the leader, but that's just You know, they have to be really. I think the
Mhm.
PFL production's really good, especially with the names that they've got in there. You know, they've got a lot of ex fighters in there. But then you look at Bellator and it doesn't transition to. I think when you watch PFL on you know, in UK's terrestrial channel 4,
Mhm.
they make a UK version of it. With Bellator, when they cut to the American ads, they just show the octagon with no music. No, they just show a pit, almost like a camera footage. It's poor, and it certainly needs to be upped. But you know, Bellator, like we say every week, Bellator gonna Bellator.
Bellator gonna Bellator. Speaking of something that actually wasn't on Bellator, I would have thought this is like a Bellator. I can't. Okay, make sense of this. KSI fought 2 guys, but it wasn't a tournament. He just fought 2 guys.
So, from what I understand, KSI was fighting another fellow YouTuber. Said YouTuber pulled out.
Okay.
He then signs up to fight another. I'm not sure if he was a YouTuber or a rapper.
Okay.
A guy called Swarms.
Gotcha.
Fan reaction to that was not great because this guy, no one really had ever heard of him, and if they had heard of him, he'd never trained for a boxing match in his life. KSI almost says, you know, to make up for this, I'll fight 2 people in one night, one of which will be a professional boxer. He gets a Bulgarian professional boxer in. Nobody from his team have done the background research. This guy's got white power or white. He's a you know, for want of a better word, racist.
Yes.
Apparently had some very questionable Facebook posts. He gets pulled from the fight. They then put in a guy whose record is 2-5.
That's what I'm seeing here. Yeah.
So, you know, it is what it is. He's a professional boxer. However, he's from a couple of weight classes below KSI. The whole thing was, you know, how is this going to go? Is KSI going to fight 2 guys back to back? Is he going to fight, you know, 12? He might end up having to go 12 rounds. No, these are 3 3-minute rounds. The first fight ended in a comical fashion. I don't know if you've seen any of the highlights, but the guy was running, quite literally spinning and running away. The knockout, quote unquote, comes as KSI lands a left hook on the shoulder, but the guy's running away, falls over, referee calls it off. Shit show. What can you expect from YouTube boxing when no one's really ever heard of the other guy?
Yeah.
There were a few decent knockouts. A guy called Salt Pappy, never. I'm not really in this world. He looks not too bad. As far as skill for skill, he actually looks pretty good. The guy can. No word of a lie. I think, you know, he's not like these guys that are just going in with headgear and just throwing and just winging shots. He is. You can tell that he knows his way about a boxing ring and he knows how to throw an actual shot.
Yeah.
The main event then starts with KSI versus, I think his name is Luis Pineda. This professional boxer. For minute 1, Pineda was complaining. This guy is a professional boxer. And he was whinging and complaining that KSI was hitting him around the back of the head. The KSI was hitting him in the spine. I mean, it was one of the worst. You know, he was the worst person, ability-wise. I watched some highlights because I thought I'd put myself through this for the podcast. I watched some highlights of the entire card.
You're braver than me.
Bigger
man than I am.
As a friend, I wouldn't suggest going to watch it, but you know, it didn't do him any favors, KSI, because this guy was probably the worst boxer on the card. How he was ever given a license to box professionally is beyond me. And he was constantly, every single shot. It could have been a jab to the temple, and this guy was like, "Oh, referee, back of the head," and you know, luckily it was called off. I think it was the final round TKO technically. That fight for sure didn't do KSI and YouTube boxing any favors, because the guy who was supposed to be a professional boxer was the worst on the card without a doubt. And it was embarrassing, to be honest. It was really embarrassing to see the guy just obviously just shrink in the moment. But it was yeah. If I'm Jake Paul, I'm sleeping pretty well, knowing that yes, KSI fought a professional boxer before me, but the state of that guy, he shouldn't be anywhere near a ring ever again.
Yeah, it's a bit embarrassing. 2-5. That's an actual professional boxer versus just some guy. KSI in the boxing world is just some guy. But the thing is that we tune in. We do know that fighting. Fight sport business is quite entertaining business. But you want to move it as close to actual sport as possible. But yeah, this sounds like a total farce. It just sounded like a waste of time. Nobody came away better. It's not like when Jake Paul fights and we actually come away with some notes of like, this guy's maybe a little bit better than we think. He's beating guys with names. He's beating legit dudes here and there, or semi-legit dudes. We're coming away from this of like, this is worse than we thought.
Yeah, for sure. And like, from the last time we saw KSI against Logan Paul, I don't know, 4 years ago or whenever it was, he's shown improvements without a doubt. He's leaned out a lot and he's improved his technique, but huge flaws in his game. Constantly leaning out to try and because like I say, we watch one championship and we see these knockouts and we see these Muay Thai guys who are masters of range and DJ who can effortlessly switch between stances, and then you go over and see highlights of sort of KSI swinging with sort of open hand punches. No disrespect to him, because he's put in the work clearly to improve his talent, and you can only look as good almost as your opponent. If your opponent's awkward and doesn't want to fight and doesn't fight like a proper boxer, and you've been sparring proper boxers, it's going to be hard.
It's going to be, yeah.
But don't fight someone who doesn't want to be in there at all, like this Pineda guy. He didn't want to be in there. He wanted to come in, get paid, and get out of there as soon as possible. And he probably got weighed in quite a lot because he was a late replacement. But yeah, the next matchmaking, he said he wants to be back, I think in November or January or whenever he said. I can't quite remember, but it has to be a better class of opponent, because if not, the interest is going to dwindle.
Well, yeah, and I feel like this is kind of the point where Logan Paul fell off. But Jake Paul, every fight we get a little bit more interested. And that's we all start as this is a farce. He gets more and more legit. KSI sold out the O2, and we all walk away as like, he's less legit of a boxer than he was before this fight night. That's not bad. Sure. That's not the direction you want to go in. Selling out the O2 is a big deal. And then coming away with it and going like, this was a garbage fight night. I don't know what to do. Like, he's not going to fight a pro boxer. That's just not his career.
You called out Tommy Fury. I mean, it makes a little bit of sense, I guess, because Tommy isn't, the best pro boxer we've ever seen, but on paper is a pro boxer. I think Tommy Fury absolutely wipes the floor with him, though.
Yeah, ideally, yeah.
But like I say, it is what it is. We've luckily this weekend we don't have to watch stuff like that. We've got, even this week, we've got a decent contender series card. Quite a decent contender series card. I was looking down the card last night, and you've got an undefeated guy in one fight, two undefeated girls in another fight, both of which just raining down finishes. You've got a guy 12-2 versus 15-1. Two undefeated guys in the co-main event, and then in the main event you've got one undefeated guy against one guy who's only got one loss, and that's for grabbing the cage in Rising. So it's a solid card. And then we look ahead to UFC Paris, which again is well, what I can say about Paris is it's not KSI versus two people in one night, and I'm glad about that.
Yeah, contender series, like you said, I'm actually surprised how many O's are on this card. Undefeated people on this card. This contender series has some okay people coming up. But yeah, we have Gane versus Tuivasa, first UFC event in France. This is kind of a big deal for that reason. I'm not sure, how much the sport will grow. I talked to some guys who cover the sport professionally in Germany, and they were like, "Hey, MMA struggles in Germany. MMA is not there in Germany." And I said, "Could it make it in France?" And he said, "Yeah, absolutely. Just different people, different attitude towards new sports, or like, because Germany really does think MMA is like impure or very brutal or very caveman." And yeah, sometimes I know.
You've got Luke Rockhold rubbing blood all over Paulo Costa's probably not giving MMA the best name, but
and do you remember the first I think like one of the only times the UFC ever went to Germany, UFC 99, where like Stefan Struve had that massive cut and you could see his skull. And I think at one point he just like put his finger in it. Yeah, I can see why Germany's not in it. But yeah, France, the German cohorts that I speak with, they said France can make a go of it. And it could be a very successful market. But let's break down. Starting from the top, heavyweight main event, 2 top fivers in the heavyweight UFC division. Tai Tuivasa versus Ciryl Gane. Oh, what do you think? What do you have in this one? It's a good one.
I think it's a fascinating fight because how does this go? I know it sounds ridiculous because we thought that the keys to victory for each man in the last main event, Leon's got to keep it standing and keep his distance, and Usman had to try and close the distance, get in the wrestling. That's exactly what played out until it didn't. In this one, Gane, in my opinion, is a far more skilled man. He's the far better technical striker, and he can, if he wants to, he can fight his way to victory, which I can probably see him doing. Why would he put himself in danger against Tai Tuivasa, who 5 knockouts in his last 5 fights? Tai Tuivasa, all of which have come fairly early, I believe. You know, first round, second round, all knockouts. And what I would say is that he's been gifted with, had some quite favourable matchmaking. He hasn't fought one wrestler.
Yeah.
And, could we see some wrestling? Although they're both strikers, Gane was exposed last time out in the wrestling against Francis Ngannou. Tai Tuivasa, his last loss came against Sergey Spivak and he was taken down 6 times.
Yeah.
These guys have a clear hole in their wrestling game, but don't expect that to be really, exposed in this one. I think for whoever wins this, Curtis Blades is next. And Curtis Blades is going to expose that wrestling hole in whoever wins this. It's a 5-round main event fight. Gane's gone 5 rounds 3 times and been scheduled, I think, 4 times.
Yep.
And never really looked fatigued, apart from in that last fight against Ngannou, but that was a different kind of fatigue. That was wrestling fatigue that he wasn't really used to, and he looked like he sort of was just taken by surprise. Tai Tuivasa has only been scheduled to go 5 rounds once, and he lost that fight in the second round against JDS. Gane has to be on his toes, which he's phenomenal at, and stay out of Tai Tuivasa's range, because we've seen it, against Tai Tuivasa, Derek Lewis, Augusto Sakai, Greg Hardy, Harry Hunsucker, Stefan Struve. These are all his fights from 2020. And he has knocked out every single one of them. And it's, Stefan Struve punches, overhand right, counter hook against Greg Hardy, if you remember, which was great to watch. Punches against Augusto Sakai, and then that elbow against Derek Lewis that just flatlined Derek Lewis. I mean, Ciryl Gane, if he's clever, he almost just follows the sort of Rocky Edwards blueprint of teep kicks, jabs, keeping his distance, not getting into range. Maybe you can step in and look to Muay Thai clinch with the and land the knee, but you don't want to be in Tai Tuivasa's range because he will make you pay for it in more ways than one.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Unless we're going to see something new out of Tai Tuivasa that we've never seen before, and you and I have got caught in this exact trap previously, unless we're going to see anything new that Tai Tuivasa has never done in his career, I think this is a pretty good fight for Ciryl Gane. I think this will look pretty similar to Ciryl Gane, Derek Lewis. I don't have any reason to think that Tai Tuivasa is going to start wrestling. I know he trained at some point in his career out of AKA, but all of the gains has just been knockouts. We still haven't seen him do any of the wrestling or anything like that. So yeah, I think this is a good fight for Ciryl Gane. I don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the Go main event is far more interesting than the main event, which I'm pretty sure it's not, but I pray that this would be 5 rounds, but it's not. It's 3 5s. Robert Whittaker, Marvin Vettori.
Go ahead, break it down. It's an interesting one, isn't it?
For sure. I mean, last time we saw Robert Whittaker lose against Israel Adesanya, he bounced back against Darren Till, battered Jared Cannonier, battered Calvin Gastelum. He then had the rematch with Izzy and obviously lost that was his last fight. So what are we going to see from Whittaker? Is he going to bounce back like we saw him against those 3 guys and look phenomenal again? Or is he going to sort of have let that kind of take its toll on him, really? And is Vettori going to just be able to just outwork him? Because it's only 3 rounds. Whittaker is a 5-round fighter and this is only 3 rounds. I don't think we learned anything about Robert Whittaker from I don't think we learned anything about Marvin Vettori last time out against Paulo Costa, because I was up at light heavyweight for a start. That was the farcical nature of that entire fight. I think Whittaker's got the better striking, but I'm not sure if we'll see any wrestling, because each guy's wrestling takedown defense is so good. But I think Whittaker can also possibly even out wrestle Vettori. I think I don't think it's as close as people are making out on the side of Vettori. Although he's a good fighter, I think what Robert Whittaker's, you got Whittaker and Adesanya, and at the moment you then got Pereira, and then you've got everybody else in the division. I think that's how this fight will play out.
Yeah, honestly, I agree with you on that. But I will tell you what we did learn about Marvin Vettori in the Paulo Costa fight is that Marvin Vettori can't come up with any game plans to counter how effective his opponents are. Like, we were coming off of the Ciryl Adesanya low kick beatdown against Paulo Costa. So, he has a weakness to low kicks. What does Marvin Vettori do? Throws no low kicks the entire fight. This guy doesn't, his brain is the problem. His physicality is great. His fighting skill is pretty good. It's up here that he's missing.
I think he won that Paulo Costa fight on being slightly quicker than Paulo Costa and managing to catch him in the exchanges.
Yeah.
With Whittaker's karate style, he's not going to catch Whittaker. Whittaker's going to be in, and then he's going to be all the way out.
Yeah.
Vettori's not going to be able to catch him. And, if I'm Robert Whittaker, I'm winning this, and I'm praying that Alex Pereira beats Ciryl Adesanya in November, because a third fight between them two is a pretty hard sell. He's knocked him out. Izzy's knocked Whittaker out. He's outpointed him pretty dominantly over 5 rounds. Mm-hmm. I'm praying that Alex Pereira dominates Ciryl Adesanya, so there's no question for a rematch.
Who do you think is better? Against Alex Pereira, it just has to be Robert Whittaker. I was going to say, does Marvin Vettori do better, or does Whittaker? Whittaker, I know the answer. Whittaker does better against Alex Pereira.
Oh, for sure. Alex Pereira, unless Vettori can just use his... Because obviously Vettori is a bigger guy than Robert Whittaker. Unless he can use his size and sort of just lean on Pereira against the fence, I think in that situation Vettori can maybe do quite well. But I don't think that you want to get in that range with Pereira, because that's Sean Strickland. You walk in anywhere close to Alex Pereira and he's knocking your head off. It's just not really worth the risk to try and close the distance. You got to almost try and outpoint Alex Pereira, which is far easier said than done.
Man, yeah, you don't want to give him 25 minutes in 25 minutes he'll land a left hook is the thing. You don't want to give him that amount of time, you know what I mean?
I mean, just look at your article, top 5 left hook knockouts. And that was, that's 5 of many. That's just the top 5. There's probably 55 more left hooks that he's landed that have done damage to his opponents throughout his, kickboxing and UFC career. So, like you say, give him 25 minutes and he will land on you. And unfortunately for Ciryl Adesanya, he's got to get in there. Ciryl Adesanya in recent times has gone 25 minutes regularly.
Yeah, yes.
That's a risk against Alex Pereira. That is a risk. It
really is. You're going to give him 25 minutes. And like you said, the left hook is there. It's got 2 hands, and he's knocked people out with both of his hands. You're going to give him 25 minutes to demonstrate. You need to get him out of there fast. Anyway, so Whittaker probably is the clear winner, unless he's really deteriorated in his knee health and stuff like that. And those are very much possibility when it comes to Robert Whittaker. We don't know where his health is. We have to assume that it's good because that's all we've seen out of him. But unless he's really deteriorated, that's a good fight for Robert Whittaker. A couple other good fights on this card. I want to jump down to Nathaniel Wood, though. I was just thinking, didn't I just see him fight last week?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he fought at the end of July against Charles Roach on the London card.
Oh, he looked good too. And this was a month ago. A month and he's jumping back in. Good for him.
Yeah, I think a lot of what helps him out is that he doesn't have to cut that weight down to 135 anymore. He's obviously fighting up at featherweight.
Yeah.
And he looked phenomenal against Charles Roach. The low kick, I love a low kick, and the low kick was just absolutely killing him. But, same with Charles Jourdain. He only fought a week before Nathaniel Wood. He obviously went 3 rounds with Shane Burgos, 2 a loss. But, he did go 3 rounds with Shane Burgos. What a piece of matchmaking this is. And it's come on fairly short notice for both men. This fight was only announced, I think, about a fortnight to 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, right.
Really, really good piece of matchmaking, in my opinion. I think this is that, for me, is the fight outside of the main and co-main, the fight to watch. If you only watch 3 fights, it's Nathaniel Wood, Charles Jourdain, and the co-main and main events.
Absolutely. That's why I was like, I'll skip over these couple of people coming off losses, trying to get kind of fight back into the top 15 is a lot of this card. And then a lot of French talent, and then a lot of Joaquin Buckley just out of nowhere. You're just like, yeah, French guy. Joaquin Buckley on the
Yeah.
prelims?
Yeah. What I mean, I don't really quite get that one. It is what it is, because he had he shot to fame with that jumping spinning kick against Kasanganai. He then knocked out Jordan Wright, and then he suffered that big high kick knockout.
Yep.
And since then he's gone three wins on the bounce, including a split decision win against Abdul Razak Hassan.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we had the win last time out against his teammate Duradev, but Imanov's a good fighter. He beat Ian Heinisch, he beat Edmund Shabazian, both by finish in the second round. I think this has got Imanov written all over it. But like you said, there's a lot of French talent. There's 4 French fighters on this card. But what does surprise me is that there's only one Frenchman making his debut, and it's the first fight of the night, William Gomi. 10-2, been fighting. He's undefeated since 2016. He's finished almost all of his fights. He's had one fight on Cage Warriors, UAE Warriors, Eras. So he's talented without a doubt. 25-year-old guy. But why is there only one French guy making his debut? There should be. When we go to Liverpool, multiple English people making their debuts. When we go to the UK, multiple like British people making their debuts. It's a shame to only see one guy making his debut. But I guess we did have Cedric Doumbia, but that was a strange situation. Situation with that one.
The French commission said he's not experienced enough to be fighting who you guys paired him up against. And sure, on paper, but Cedric Doumbia has dozens of kickboxing fights. He's not inexperienced. But then the weird part was that it then showed that he was cut by the UFC. And then he went on Twitter and said, no, this is true. I'm still fighting. I don't think
he is still fighting.
No, that's what he said on Twitter, but nowhere else has confirmed this. The UFC has said, no, he's cut. So Cedric, for some reason, thinks that he's still fighting in UFC Paris. It just gets weirder and weirder the deeper we go.
I mean, I in a way, rules are rules.
Sure.
So if he's not experienced enough, technically, if he's not experienced enough, they can't let him fight.
I kind of get it, sure.
But logically, so yeah, on the UFC website, he's not on it at all. But there's also a lot of fights that aren't on the UFC website, as far as the UFC don't have the full card on their website. I don't think.
No, they
in comparison to Tapology, they never seem to. But why? Just because you signed a guy and the commission that you signed him to, the French commission, that is, obviously don't let him fight because he's not experienced enough. He's only fighting a guy that's 5-2, and the guy is 0-2 in the UFC. Darian Weeks, it's not. It's like he's fighting a 20-10 guy.
I know.
Where the but also, why cut him then? You guys are giving Mike Jackson and Dean Barry work. You guys are giving CM Punk work. If that's the case, Alex Pereira shouldn't have ever made his debut because he was experienced in a whole nother sport. Why not keep Doumbia on the books, as it were, and put him on UFC 279? Because yes, we've got quite a few fight announcements for UFC 279, but the card is still shit. It's still so. If the main event falls out of UFC 279, that card needs cancelling, in my opinion, because it is simply not strong enough to. This week we've got Kevin Holland versus Daniel Rodriguez. Phenomenal fight.
Good stuff.
Not a pay-per-view headliner. Tony Ferguson versus Li Jingliang. Phenomenal fight. Not a pay-per-view headliner.
So not a pay-per-view headliner, no.
So if Diaz Chamaya falls out,
Tony Ferguson is the main event.
I mean, we'll go on to talk about that next week because we have to break that one down in more detail. But
I hope there's something else that we can talk about because, man, Tuesday nights suck.
Darian Weeks has been booked. So he is obviously the guy that's meant to fight Doumbia. He's been booked for UFC 279 against a guy who's 8-1. but who's probably had less professional fights than Dumbier in any sport.
Yeah, combat sports, pro combat. Yeah,
and like I say, why if the French Commission want to do everything by the book, and that's fair enough. If they've got a rule where you have to have, I don't know, at least 5 professional MMA fights before you can fight in France, fair enough.
Whatever.
But why is the UFC now cutting him? That's not his fault. That's their fault for not doing their research into the French Commission's rules. But
he can fight in Florida. Florida doesn't care what happens there. He can fight in Texas. He can fight in California, even.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter. It was one commission, and that's not a consistent rule across the other commissions.
Am I right? So I just want to see. Was he? I'm not sure. Was he 2-0 in mixed martial arts, or was he
2-0? Yeah, 2-0, and I think 2 TKOs as well.
Yeah, 2 TKOs, both of which one in the first round, one at the end of the second round.
So combined kickboxing and MMA, he's on a 6-fight knockout win streak right now.
And you think that this guy is not good enough, or it's not safe for him to
Like Darian Weeks.
Darian Weeks, a guy who, with no disrespect, is 0-2 and has lost and been pretty badly beaten in both of his outings. Against Baron Barberena and Ian Gary.
Yep.
Sometimes you've got to ask the questions, haven't you?
Yeah, just hopefully we see Cedric. I want to see Cedric in the UFC or back in Glory, one or the other. But yeah, hopefully back in the UFC, fighting in Florida or somewhere like that.
I tell you where we could see him, the PFL next year. They've got their European sort of almost contender series sort of style thing. If I'll try and really get it in. I think I've got an interview with Brendan Loughnane this week. So I'm really going to try and sort of get a bit more details about that European sort of tournament, as it were, that they've got going on. And Dumbier, French, European, in the PFL. Brendan Loughnane is currently the PFL's gain is the UFC's loss. He's fighting for $1 million in November.
Yep.
Dumbier could be the exact same. UFC's loss, PFL's gain. And if they play their cards right, I think it would be a sensible thing to do, but we'll have to wait and see.
And I think the PFL's welterweight division is one of the better ones that they have, of like guys like Ray Cooper, Brett Cooper. I recognize Gleason Tebow. Gleason Tebow's there. We could knock out Gleason Tebow. Actually, I think Gleason Tebow could wrestle Cedric Duambe to a decision. Tebow's a very good fighter still. But yeah, I think he'd be a fun fit in PFL at the very least. I think it'd be great.
Yeah, for sure. And he'd definitely get favourable matchmaking in the first couple of fights because, at the end of the day, he is 2-0. It's similar to Dakota Ditcheva. She was 5-0 or 4. Yeah, she was 5-0. She got fairly favourable matchmaking against a girl that didn't want to fight. So, the PFL know how to build their stars and they'd probably go in the right way about it if they sign Cedric Dumbier.
Oh, I agree with you. I think it'd be great to see. It's unfortunate we didn't get to see him in UFC Paris because it would have been too much fun, but it is what it is. What else do we need to cover off before we head out of here?
I think that's about it. We've got a stacked week next week. We've got UFC 279 and we've got a big boxing match where Clarissa Shields is going to lose that O. So tune in to find out why she's going to lose that O when Savannah Marshall knocks her head off.
All right. I'll do some tape study for that one because that sounds like a lot of fun. I like that sell a lot. Next week, tune in for that. Tim Wheaton, Frazer Krohn, MMA Sucka Podcast. Thanks so much for your time, folks.
Thank you very much.